On Tech News Today, Don Reisinger is our co-anchor today. We're also joined by Matthew Sparks with the Telegraph newspaper, Addie Robertson from The Verge, and GigaOM's Jeff John Roberts. We'll talk about massive global phone surveillance that barely involves the NSA. We'll talk about the NSA too. Plus, we'll talk about whether you should have the right to own and sell the digital content you pay for. All that and more coming up right now.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Friday, June 6th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free 2-week trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TNT. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Mike Elgan.
I'm Jason Howell.
Tech News Today explores the big stories of the day with some of the world's best journalists. Our guest co-anchor today is Don Reisinger, a technology journalist who writes for CNET, eWeek, SlashGear, and other major publications. You also write for a newspaper, don't you?
Yeah, we do. I do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm out there and about. You know, I keep myself busy. That's all I try to do.
All right. Well, we're going to try to keep you busy here today. You know, today
and now
is
you're keeping me busy.
Yeah. It's always somebody.
Yeah.
Today is the 30th anniversary of Tetris, the universe's most successful video game, and this is really quite a story. And sadly, as I was preparing to talk about Tetris today, I heard the theme song, and now I can't get it out of my head. It's the catchiest darn thing in history. Well, what we're looking at, if you're watching the live video, this is the original Tetris. It's being played on a Soviet-made DVK-2. I remember my first Soviet-made DVK-2. Those are the days. Got it at Radio Shack. The creator of Tetris, his name is Alexei Pajitnov. And he built this, during the Soviet era, in Soviet Russia, the video games Play You, right? Somebody smuggled it out of the Soviet Union through Hungary, and then sold the rights. Somebody who didn't create it sold the rights. There was a big battle with all the video game companies. It ended up in the hands of Nintendo, and even today, it's one of the most popular video games ever. It's had over 425 million paid downloads on the mobile app version. So quite a success story. Don, are you a Tetris enthusiast?
Oh, I am. I used to play it on the Game Boy. I used to play it. It was everywhere and if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about this. You can check me and research me, but isn't it true that Alexei made almost nothing on the game because of all those licensing things? I mean, This is one of the most popular games ever. He's arguably on the same level as Shigeru Miyamoto and guys like that in terms of the popularity of his game, and yet he didn't make a dime on it. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and he started making money on this. He got it together. He ended up in the U.S., got a lawyer apparently, ended up making money, I believe, not until the 90s, but initially, huge amounts of money were made on this without him ever receiving a penny. And by the way, Gilligan was never properly compensated for his role on Gilligan's Island either. So,
there you go.
The world is so unfair to content creators. Well, why don't we do the news instead of talking about Gilligan? What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, the second biggest telecom in the world admitted that dozens of governments routinely spy on its customers. International telecom giant Vodafone said in a report today that governments have direct access to the company's infrastructure, enabling spy agencies and police to listen to conversations, often without even asking Vodafone's permission, as well as track the location of users and even monitor the websites they visit. Matthew Sparks is the deputy head of technology for the Telegraph newspaper, and he joins us now. Welcome, Matthew.
Hello there. Thank you.
And, of course, he's calling in by the phone. Now, the one-year anniversary of the first Edward Snowden revelations was yesterday, and today Vodafone publishes this report, it's almost like a confessional about what's been going on all this time. Why are they publishing this now, do you think?
Well, it's an interesting question. Like you say, it's 1 year since the Snowden revelations, and ever since then, we've been sort of forced to rethink our relationships with these carriers and with the companies we use online and with our own governments. And and just really, we've been hit in the face by this information of really who has access to our what we thought was personal and private information. So you could cynically look at this and think, yes, Vodafone have been forced to disclose this. On the other side of the coin, you could think, well, they're one of the first people to release a report as detailed as this, and I know sort of own up to what they are giving government. So, yeah, they've been backed into a corner, but also they are one of the first people to do this. So it's an interesting one, really.
It certainly is. Now, this is a 40,000-word report. It's an absolutely massive report. Nobody made them do it. They did it on their own. And now Vodafone, just, in the U.S., I don't think Vodafone has a huge amount of mind share, but they have 400 million customers around the world. They are a gigantic company, and they're in dozens of countries.
Absolutely enormous.
Yeah. And so...
it's... Sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead. You had a point to make.
Well, like you say, perhaps not an enormously recognizable brand in the US, but the second biggest carrier in the world, and like you say, 400 million users, and they're in 29 different markets, 29 different countries. So, I mean, certainly here in the UK, they're an enormously recognizable company. A huge market share in mobile and broadband. So it is huge news.
Yes, and some of the countries, I believe that 6 countries, they have an arrangement whereby the governments can tap phones and without even notifying Vodafone, let alone asking for permission. And this is really interesting because my first response to this, my knee-jerk reaction to this news was those dirty, rotten Vodafone so-and-sos. And then as I started reading it, I'm realizing, they make the point in their report that everything that they're talking about in each of these countries, and of course some of the countries they're not allowed by those national governments to even talk about it, but everything they're talking about in those countries are rules that are applied to all carriers in those countries. It's kind of like the carriers in these countries are all keeping this shared secret of exactly what has been going on, and they're basically saying that these governments often they won't let you operate in their countries unless you follow their rules, even if their rules are even if they're not democracies, even if the rules are unfair or should be illegal or whatever. Doesn't matter. If you want to do business in those countries, you have to follow those rules, which raises the question, should companies like Vodafone be in those countries if they're contributing to things like human rights violations, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely correct. I mean, reading between the lines of the report, well, not even between the lines, Vodafone are calling for an end to this kind of what they call direct access, which is where, like you say, these 6 countries, which they don't name, they can't name them, 6 countries have secret cables, basically, which can siphon off any data that the governments want. They're obviously not keen on doing that. It leaves a bad taste in the mouth, but it is the law of the country they're in. And they don't, if they want to be in those countries, they don't have a choice. But they do have a choice not to be in those countries if they don't want to be. So, they have chosen to operate in those markets and to abide by those laws, really.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that there are 29 countries here. They all have different laws, and it's a hugely complex sort of issue, really. I mean, some of the countries won't even let Vodafone say what they do. Vodafone seems to have sort of got around this by saying there are 6 that have this direct access, but every one of these 29 countries has different laws which allow the government to do different things. So it's a very tangled web that they're trying to unpick in this report. It's like I say, it's 40,000 words. Part of that is just because the issue is so complex. But the sort of thrust of the truly startling thing here is the 6 countries that have this direct access. It means that the government doesn't have to say, we would like a warrant to look at this person or to look at this person. They can just siphon off absolutely everything and choose what's really is justifiable without any kind of oversight, really.
I have to say, my first reaction to this was, oh, okay. And I think that's scary. I think it scared me, and it's scary that I think a lot of the people around the world had the same reaction. You know, over the last year, we've been hit with report after report after report about spying, about what companies are doing with our information and our data. And here we sit with yet another revelation that is scary in its own right. But and I'm someone who cares about this stuff immensely, and yet I go, oh yeah, well, I just figured that they were doing that. I mean,
I suppose,
have we come to this point now where we're so cynical and we're so used to hearing these things that we're not really hit as hard as we should be by it? And that's my concern, that we've come to a point with all of this talk of privacy and data protection and everything, that we've just almost accepted that we don't have the rights that we believe we should. Our data is not private and safe and secure, and we can't trust any of the companies that we do business with. And this is just the latest example of, well, I guess another one's doing it.
I think so much of this is new to legislation. Mobile phone networks and the internet and social networks and all of these things are so new. I mean, okay, there are people now who are adults who have had it their whole lives, but relatively speaking, these are new things. And laws and governments just haven't caught up yet. And I think what we're seeing now is them catching up. We're reaching a point of maturity where people are realizing what's going on, and from here there'll be some kind of change. There will have to be some kind of change. Now, like you say, people are apathetic to these kind of, another story about this. But I think it's built into quite a mass of discontent now. Really, people. I don't think there are many people who would quibble with the suggestion that government surveillance is perhaps too pervasive. I believe probably most people would agree with that now. So I do think that something will have to change, even though the response to each individual story is perhaps apathy.
Right. I just think, in real quick, Mike, I think we need to take this to the next step. We've heard a lot of the news. Now where does
ham
the
radio
action come in?
Ham radio, is that the next step?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's do ham radio. That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. But no, I mean, I think the next step is, what are we going to do as individuals, as citizens who are upset about this? What are we going to do to take action and change this? And I don't think that conversation has gotten to that point yet. And I think, quite frankly, that the governments around the world don't really want that conversation to happen, because they want us to feel the way I felt when I saw that story. And I hope that we can get to that next level.
One of the interesting facts in all this is that the leading country, according to Vodafone, for metadata requests is Italy. Why? Because they're always going after the mafia, and they rely heavily on metadata to track down various mafia hitmen and dons or whatever it is, and so they can harvest this data and make them an offer they can't refuse in some kind of plea bargain or something like that. Well,
not dons like you, Don.
Yeah,
that's right.
Okay.
That's
I was
right.
worried about that for a second. Jeez.
Right. The bad kind
Italy's
of dons.
spying on me?
Probably, just because of your name and for that reason alone. Well, Matthew Sparks, I want to thank you for phoning in to Tech News today and filling us in on your story about Vodafone's big report.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, thanks again. Well, in a sec, we're going to talk a little bit about the year since the first Edward Snowden revelations. But first, I want to give you a revelation of my own. Squarespace is the place to build a website. I want to show you a website that my son built. My son is getting married this year, and so he built a Squarespace website for his wedding. And if you're watching the video feed, you can see this.
Right now.
And the reason Squarespace is so fantastic is that they hit all of they're number one in all of the areas of building a website. They're number one in design. They have 25 beautiful, beautiful templates. They're number one in ease of use. Their tools for customizing your website are unparalleled. And they're number one in terms of hosting. You can't bring a Squarespace site down. Now, if you're looking at the video feed, you see my son's website. He's got all kinds of things. But Jason, I want to, if you can go to the top there, and I'm going to show you one particular thing, which you go all the way over there. Yeah, there you go. Click on that one. So they've got a kind of a wedding registry here, and this enables my son and his fiance to, basically have their own registry because all Squarespace websites offer or could offer potentially e-commerce. So you can receive money. So that's useful if you're going to be selling something as a small business, you're going to be selling something as a medium business, or if you want to just raise money for your nonprofit, or for your school, or for your wedding, for example. So this is a really, you have to use Squarespace if you're going to build a website of any kind, because there's nothing else like it. And it's mobile ready. When you go to a Squarespace website on a mobile device, whether it's a tablet or a phone, no matter what kind of device it is, it's going to look perfect and native on that device. So you just go there with your Android phone or your iPhone, look at a Squarespace website, and without any thing on your part, no action on your part at all, Squarespace will automatically natively customize the interface for a mobile device and make it look perfect and beautiful on that mobile device. So that's really important, because increasingly people surf the web on phones and less on desktop computers. So you want to be able to serve all of those users.
Hey, Mike, one more thing on Squarespace. I've just been playing around with it lately, and I got to tell you, it's fantastic. The one thing I really like about it is, and it doesn't always get mentioned, but I think it's a great service for budding web developers that are just trying to learn, how do things work, because it does have the WYSIWYG editor and all that stuff. But you can also see CSS. You can put in HTML code. You can really actually teach yourself a lot about web development with Squarespace, and I think that's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool feature.
It really is. And you think about building. If you built a website before, you like putting things like pictures, kind of the pain in the neck. You got to upload to the server or whatever. It depends on what kind of service you're using. With Squarespace, you can just grab 30 pictures and drag and drop them, and they are posted beautifully and beautifully designed on your page. It's just so easy to use. You got to use it. So start a free 2-week trial with no credit card required and start building your website. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TNT, and that will get you 10% off the price. And you'll also show your support for Tech News Today, and we appreciate that. We also thank Squarespace for their support of Tech News Today. And we want you to remember that a better web awaits, and it starts with your new Squarespace website. Well, it is hard to believe, but it's been a year since the first revelations from the Edward Snowden trove of leaked NSA documents. They were first published in the Guardian newspaper 1 year ago yesterday. Addie Robertson writes for The Verge, and she's here to tell us about the article she wrote on the year after Snowden. Welcome, Addie.
Hi.
Now, can you take us back 1 year and tell us about the first Snowden information published by the Guardian?
All right, so the very first thing that was published, which I was actually at E3 gaming conference when it happened, was a court order sent to Verizon Business Services that required them to give up all metadata that was collected. That's call records, like time and duration of calls, who you were calling, for 90 days. We would later learn that this had been going on for years with other providers as well, although it's still really unclear what the scope was, and that it's still going on. The last one was reauthorized just a couple months ago.
And then next came Prism and XKeyscore. Prism became kind of a poster child, the label for some of the NSA revelations in the beginning, even though it was just one of probably hundreds of internal code names that were used by the NSA that appeared on various things. But Prism was especially interesting because it involves, big social networks and companies like Google. Can you remind us about those programs? What are Prism and XKeyscore?
So Prism was originally sort of reported as the catch-all term. It was, I think, maybe the second thing that was published about. And ultimately, what it would be part of, it and XKeyscore, was that they were search tools for data that was gathered either through direct access to company servers or through data requests. The original story was that it was the former, that they were directly tapping into Google, Microsoft, Yahoo servers. All the companies denied this. Later, they would talk about getting limited requests. But we would also later find out that the NSA and Britain's intelligence service were, as far as we understand, tapping directly into the fiber optic cables of Google and Yahoo's networks. So all these things get collected. Unlike phone metadata, this is actual content. This is things like emails, and they can be stored and parsed.
Yeah. Well, by the way, and this is just a contextual comment that I have. We talk about metadata, regular data versus metadata. Phone metadata, for example, includes the phone number, who was called, what time, that sort of information. I've read articles that say that if spy agencies or whoever it is that's harvesting this kind of data, if they were forced to choose between metadata and the actual data, in other words, between the metadata about phone calls and the actual phone call, they would usually choose the metadata. It reveals more about what's going on, who's connecting with who, when, and what the circumstances are than an actual phone call does, because people often speak in code and that sort of thing. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind, both for our previous story and for this story. Now, Addie Robinson, Edward Snowden handed over everything he had, as I understand it, to journalist Glenn Greenwald probably, gosh, almost a year and a half ago, and then it took a while for Greenwald to get his paper to publish it. Why are revelations still coming out? We're still having what are, to the public, new revelations. Why are these being strung out so occasionally? Why didn't it all just come in one big rush, do you think?
I mean, obviously, Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras are probably the only ones who can really answer that. But I think the one answer is that they genuinely are sorting through everything, that this isn't really like the WikiLeaks cable dump. They're going through and they're trying to contextualize and connect everything. So if you're looking at a code word or you're looking at a technical term, they're trying to actually sort those out and find out, all right, well, what's actually a big story here? The second answer is that this is the only reason that we're still talking about them. The promise that we might get something more, the sort of continuous string of things that the government has to respond to, the things that are keeping Congress sort of on its toes as much as they are on their toes.
Yeah, I think there might be something else here. Business. You know, the Guardian, New York Times are in business to make money. They're in business to keep us reading. You dump it all at once, and guess what? That's it. You know, I have nothing else to show you. But if I do it over time, look, I might be able to make some money. I hate to sound like a cynic again, but there is that element here. And I know I've read a couple of things around the web. One being that, you know, these guys have said, you know, there are some things we might never release because it's too damning to, you know, the security efforts or whatever around the world. And the second point I guess I have to bring up is should we trust the Guardian and the New York Times with all this information? I mean, is it time to say, okay, you guys are the you're standing at the gate and only allowing certain pieces of information to get through? At what point does it open up to the community and allow us to decide what we want to see and allow us to see what to determine what we care about and what we don't? You know, having a gatekeeper response here or having a gatekeeper protocol in place has been somewhat successful, you might say, just in terms of leaking information. But is it going to be successful in the long term? And what don't we know? And what could we know? And this whole dribs and drabs of leaking information, how does that affect us over time as individuals and citizens? And I think that should be cause for concern. But let's not forget here, it's nice to take a rosy picture of all this, but let's not forget that they are backed by companies that are trying to make money.
Right. Well, also that I don't even think the Guardian and the Washington Post are so much in play. Maybe Washington Post, all of this is The Intercept, the thing that they actively spun off as their own business. Yep. And Greenwald's book just came out, which came with 50 documents, something like that were never before seen, but that largely didn't reveal anything new.
Yeah, personally, I think I tend to buy the justification by Glenn Greenwald in his book, which is that both he and Edward Snowden had as their biggest fear the possibility that they would release information and people would be shocked for like one news cycle and then kind of forget about it and wander away. Kind of, they feared the sort of revelation fatigue that Don Reisinger mentioned in the previous segment, and that was a reasonable fear. I mean, that they were pretty sure that's what would happen, and so they crafted this. Well, Glenn Greenwald crafted this drip it out process over time as a way to keep the public interested, because they felt, of course, you know, they're not disinterested. Glenn Greenwald is an activist journalist and is really out to reveal this and really wants to make the biggest impact he can. And you know, I'm a capitalist. I think it's fine that he makes money on this as well. I don't see anything wrong with that. But yeah, you know, there's money to be made by everybody. But I think this was, in hindsight, probably the best way to go, simply because people do get, you know, sort of their eyes glaze over after a while, and you know how much outrage can you sustain? So you know it's worked. I think is the bottom line there. Now, Addie Robertson, this the revelations have clearly damaged both the United States and its foreign policy, and also certain segments of the U.S. economy. Now, people disagree strongly as to whether the damage was caused by the traitor Edward Snowden, or whether the hero Edward Snowden revealed the crimes of the NSA. Either way, the fact that we all now know this information, it has damaged the U.S. foreign policy and has damaged U.S. technology companies. Do you have a sense of how bad that damage is, or how long it's likely to last?
I think it's hard to say. And I think that the reports that it is damaged to some extent are self-serving, either by sort of lots of foreign companies talking about it as sort of a marketing opportunity. But no, genuinely, I think that there has been a sense that you can no longer trust somebody like Google, that there was always this sense that, yes, no, they're using your stuff for advertising. But now it's that if they're using this for advertising, someone else can probably see it as well, and we know that they do.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll be advertising better encryption technology so the NSA can't read our email. Well, Addie Robertson, I want to thank you so much for that really great article and for coming on Tech News Today and telling us all about it.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
All right. You can find Addie Robertson at TheVerge.com and on Twitter at the Dextriarchy. Look it up. That's her Twitter handle.
Sounds awesome.
Well, the biggest difference between printed books and digital ones, besides the fact that one is made out of dead trees and the other is out of digital code, is that you can own a printed book, but you usually can't own a digital one. The same goes for digital music, movies, and other downloadable content. Instead, you basically borrow digital content from the actual owners, which are companies like Amazon and Apple. Now Congress is looking at whether it's time to change all that. Jeff John Roberts writes for GigaOM about legal issues related to the digital economy and joins us now. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, Mike. Good to be here.
Now, first, I'd like to apologize to you. I think I probably told you that you'd be on around 10:15 Pacific, and our previous conversations went a little long, so I really appreciate you hanging in there. Now, you wrote that members of Congress went to New York to talk to publishing executives, librarians, and others involved in the creation and distribution of digital content. What did they tell the Congress people?
It was a pretty, as far as these sort of congressional dog and pony shows go, it was pretty balanced. It's just this notion of, because I think it's a legitimate concern, how can you sell your iTunes? How can you leave your ebooks in your will? And now you can't. So it ranged from traditional publishers like Wiley, who want none of this at all, to a fellow who runs a site called Redigi that's since been closed, that was actually amounted to a used record store where I could sell you my iTunes, and the site promised to delete mine and ensure you got a copy. But for now, it seems that the idea of extending traditional resale rights, which allow you to sell your records, your books, or your VHS tapes, are not going to be replicated, is my hunch. But what we're going to look at instead is improving the licensing regime. Right now, it's you want to buy that thing from Amazon or Apple, you can have it, but on their terms entirely. And good luck trying to figure out what those terms are. So I think that's where we're heading.
Now, the traditional principle by which content is normally sold is called the first sale doctrine. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. That's how first sale is how you balance property rights with copyright. For instance, if I buy a book you wrote, you have the copyright in that until you sell it to me, but you can't stop me from selling it to someone else. It just ensures that there's a secondary market. And your copyright, part of it sort of dies every time, or once you sell it for the first time. Dies is too strong, but it's known as exhausted, if that makes sense.
Sure. Now, some in Congress appear to believe that the solution is for companies to simply explain better that people don't own the music they pay for. For example, you go to a site to download some content, and the button that's there says buy instead of something like license. Does these comments by the congressman suggest where they're going to land on this thing? Is this all just about communicating the reality to consumers?
I think so. And I mean, if you want to be an optimist, some people say just wait till the market to sort it out, and that in a perfect world, companies will start competing on being more transparent and giving you more rights when you buy it. So will Congress step in? No time soon, but hopefully it will lead to some pressure too. As you say, maybe we'll see a license button next to a buy button. And if you pay a little more, you'll get more rights. Maybe you'll get the right to be able to resell it or the right to leave it in your will, and using sort of different pricing mechanisms to give you more power over your digital goods, which is, I think, kind of a cool idea.
If you were the majority whip, what would you direct Congress to do?
Pass immigration, fix the healthcare system.
Why not? Okay, you got my vote.
Yeah. No, realistically, I think the best answer is I would actually, as someone suggested, lean on consumer protection laws and say, hey, you can't simply, because as we saw with Amazon, remember when they took away 1984 from everyone's Kindles? We think we have to have laws to ensure that doesn't happen. And I think clearer instructions of when you buy the iTunes, not signing just a like 3-page thing of legalese, but to explain clearly and understandably what's going on. So I think that's probably the best route to take, is sort of consumer protection and transparency.
And don't you think this is a lot of government sort of keeping all this stuff at arm's length, pushing it away, because they realize that if you handle the book problem, we also have the issue of the video game industry complaining about used game sales and how the developers and publishers are getting nothing for those sales. You have issues, obviously, with music and with movies. It opens up a bag of worms that maybe the government doesn't want to touch. And this perhaps speaks to its own ineptitude, but also the very fact that, you know, we're in this new frontier of digital media and used media and entertainment media, and there's no quick solution here. There's no real there's no one going out there besides us in the tech community to say, look, this is what you need to think about. This is what you need to do. Again, it goes back to, I think there's a theme to this episode. Who is going to take action, and at what point will we see something positive come out of all of this? And I'm concerned that we're not going to see that anytime soon.
Yeah, well, I mean, technology, my take on it, I write about the conflict of law and technology and why do they always conflict, because I think technology moves faster than society and especially government can react to it. And that's, I think, always been the case. But you're right, it is frustrating when you see it does amount to ineptitude, but I would also argue give it time. And if you pass a new law too soon, that could be worse. Sometimes the government doing nothing is the best thing that could happen. So
that's true too. Yeah.
Well, Jeff John Roberts, I want to thank you for coming on Tech News today.
Thanks, guys. My pleasure. Have a good one, Mike.
All right, thanks
Jeff.
again. You can find Jeff John Roberts' work at gigaohm.com, and you can find the rest of his work as well as his GigaOhm work at Jeff John Roberts on Twitter. Apple's iWatch will launch in October, and it'll have a curved OLED touchscreen, according to a new report in Nikkei Asian Review. Unnamed industry sources told the paper that Apple intends to build between 3 and 5 million iWatches a month. And I want to emphasize that this is still in the category of a rumor, but you're going to be hearing a lot about this report because the Nikkei is a very reputable publication, and everybody's going to be chattering about this news. It is a rumor. They are unnamed sources, and to me, if any of this is true, Don Reisinger, the most interesting fact isn't the fact that it'll have a touchscreen or that it'll have a curved display. We know Apple's been working on that stuff for a while. The real news here, if this is in fact true, is that they're planning between 3 and 5 million iWatches a month. That is, those are huge numbers for a category where hardly anyone is selling anything.
Yeah, huge numbers that most analysts and researchers in the market are saying is not feasible at this point, or maybe even next year. You know, I'm always skeptical of these Apple articles that claim to have sources. You know, I've been doing this for a long time. Apple is loath to ever say anything, so chances are these sources came from some sort of third party. A lot of times before these announcements, we get these leaks of case designs. We say, oh, that must be what the next iPhone looks like. You know, my own bet, and this is pure, you know, just guesswork here. But I think Apple, and this is a report that came out earlier this year, so I'm getting a little bit from that. But I think it makes a little bit more sense. I think Apple is going to go more towards a smart band segment of the market first. If we look at Apple, I don't know if when you look at Apple in its entirety and what it's done, it doesn't tend to jump into markets very quickly. It allows the other companies to kind of try to figure things out, and then when it feels that there's enough of a groundswell of demand, then it jumps in. I think we see that right now with smart bands from companies like Jawbone and Nike, which it's partnering with, and others. And so My guess is Apple goes more for the smart band to build out its health kit and health features like we heard about at WWDC, and then it worries about the iWatch next year. Don't forget, Apple is very much a how can we get you to buy this new product every year or two? Right now, I don't think any company has solved that issue when it comes to watches. People own watches forever. It doesn't mean your digital watch is going to be that way, your smartwatch. But I'm not sure that Apple or any company has the solution yet to make smartwatch buyers want to buy a new smartwatch every year or two. And it's easier for Apple to make that sell with a smart band and sort of, put its toes in the water a little bit before you get too far.
Yeah, I don't see me as a 95-year-old on my deathbed handing my great-great-grandson, take my Pebble watch and keep it. It's got me through the Great War
Pebble's
of
got me through
2015. Yeah, and you brought up the issue of Apple leaks and Apple rumors and that sort of thing. I think it has to be said that there are lots and lots of Apple rumors that are horrible. You mentioned a specific type where some blurry picture, how do you even take a blurry picture anymore? But some blurry picture of a case or something like that emerges out of Asia somewhere that's supposed to be prove that it's the case or whatever. And then there are the leaks by the Wall Street Journals of the world, the Mark Gurmans on 9 to 5 Max of the world, the Ina Frieds, those kinds, which are 98% of the time they are dead on with their predictions. So it matters where the source comes from, and that's why I wanted to mention this story, because Nikkei is not a household name in the United States and Europe and much of the world, but they're probably not up there with the Wall Street Journal, but they're not a two-bit third-rate rumor-mongering rag either.
No, not by any means.
So it's another data point, something to keep in mind. And I agree with you. There's still a big question as to whether it's going to be a bracelet, essentially, or a watch. There's the third possibility that it will be both, and the fourth possibility that it will be neither. And I think it's interesting that an ad came out yesterday, an Apple ad, that really promoted wearable computing and fitness. And it was just kind of interesting that, when and if Apple comes out with an iWatch, it's going to be competing against the very devices it was essentially promoting in that ad. So that was another unexpected little bit of marketing there that I thought was fascinating.
And one other point about Apple rumors, because I think it's interesting, is most people who follow the tech space are reading about Apple rumors all the time. I would say that they have become a little bit more reliable in the last couple of years than they were several years ago when Steve Jobs was in charge. Apple is a little bit more predictable than it used to be, and the secrecy shroud that it used for all those years is not nearly as iron-tight as it used to be. So I would say that, like you said, Mike, some of these larger news organizations, these reputable news organizations, can be trusted to some degree.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great point. Well, in other news, a new software application called Open Xanadu quietly shipped in late April. The software enables users to create documents that have articles and other content embedded into the document itself. Big deal, right? Well, the thing is that the software has been in development since, are you sitting down, 1960. It's the most delayed software in history. Xanadu's developer, Ted Nelson, actually coined the term hypertext, and had he been a little bit more aggressive about shipping, he could have beat Tim Berners-Lee to the World Wide Web, and we'd now be surfing the Xanadu instead of the web. So
that'd be cool. It's a cooler name.
It's a cool name, but man, look at it. Wow.
Oof.
It is a crazy looking thing. It's got little tiny text on the outside and the main document in the middle, and when you click something, it comes zooming in. It's quite a piece of work, and this is a lesson to all of us. Hang in there. Persistence always pays off in the end, sort of.
That's right. That's right. Come up with your robotics invention today, and maybe 50 years from now, it'll be reality. It'll be great.
Absolutely. Well, Don Reisinger, that's the tech news today. I want to thank you for coming on as our guest co-anchor.
That's it? Oh, gee, I had a great time.
Yeah, it goes by so fast, and you're going to be joining us weekly from now on. Is that correct?
That is true.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to that, and of course, we'll do a big announcement on Google Plus about you joining us weekly. But thanks again for coming on today.
Hey, thank you. Had a great time.
All right. Thank you. Well, you can subscribe to Tech News Today at twit.tv/TNT. Lots of ways to subscribe. Whatever it is, whether you're on Feedly, you want RSS, whatever it is you're doing, you can subscribe in your channel of choice. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is Tech News Today TV. You can subscribe to our subreddit at technewstoday.reddit.com, and we want to hear from you. So send us an email at tnt@twit.tv, or you can leave us a voicemail by calling 260-TNT-SHOW. Also, don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight. My name's Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you Monday.